I made this barrel out of mostly recycled wood that was all just random lengths. So the first thing I did was cut several 36-inch long pieces at the miter saw. I took all those pieces and cut them all into 1/4-inch strips. And I needed about 180 of these to make a full-size barrel. Now I'm gluing these strips back together in groups of 3, and I'm bending them around a 1.5-inch block and clamping them down so that when the glue does dry, they will stay bent. Now I have 60 of these bent pieces, and to get one side flat so I can use the table saw, I'm planing them, but a joiner might work better. And now that I have a flat surface, I can use my table saw to actually get both sides parallel. Next I need to cut about a 6-degree bevel on one side of each piece, and part of the reason I bent the pieces before cutting the bevel is because each piece needs to be narrower on the ends and wider towards the middle, because the barrel is wider in the middle. And bending them first actually lets the table saw cut it narrower at the ends, because the space between the fence and the blade is smaller towards the bottom. And now I'm just using the miter saw to make the top and bottom of each piece parallel. Next I glued the pieces together and pinned them in place while the glue dried. I glued the last third separate to be the door of the liquor cabinet. Now I'm scribing a line to cut 5 inches off the top and bottom of the door to glue onto the rest of the barrel. I didn't know the best way to even this out since it isn't square, so I found a semi-flat spot in my shop and used an electric planer and guess and checked with a level. The only rabbiting bit I had was a 1/2 inch, and with the bend, the rabbet would go all the way through the wood, so I took the bearing off a flush trim bit to get a 1/4 inch rabbiting bit. I also wanted the rabbet to be an inch deep, but the bit was not long enough, so once I had my deepest cut, I put the bearing back on and used it to cut the rest of the rabbet. Now I'm using some more recycled wood to cut into 3/4 inch strips to glue it into blanks for the top, bottom, and middle shelf. Before gluing them to full size, I glued them into 6 12-inch wide panels so I could run them through the planer. And now that they were all flat, I could glue them to the full-sized panels I needed. I purposefully made the top and bottom pieces thinner than the depth of the rabbet, so when they were glued into place, there would be a 1/4 inch reveal on top. Now I'm putting on all the hardware, and I was too lazy to film it, but I had to move the hinges more towards the center so it would open. Also, as an afterthought, I glued in these strips to keep the door from going too far in. Now I'm making the middle shelf, so I cut out a semicircle and chamfered the edges. To hold the shelf in place, I drilled some holes for pins. The bend made it pretty tricky to get the shelf in, but the chamfer made it a lot easier. The gap on the top and bottom of the door was uneven, making it hard to close and open, so I used a belt sander to even it out. Next, I used the belt sander to round over any edges to get the barrel more round. Then once everything was round, I got everything smooth with an orbital sander, sanding up to 220 grit. I stained the whole thing with dark walnut to make it look aged. Next, I cut out thin strips to look like the rings on barrels. Next, I painted the strips black, and I made more strips than I needed in case the strips broke when bending them around the barrel, which some of them did.